and this is my husband. The two of us have revived this company, Fad Studios, about 2.5 years ago. So today we're going to tell you some really cool history about this company, how we ended up reviving it, and where we are taking it today. And for anyone who's never heard of Fad Studios Glassware, you're in for a treat. It's quite the cool history of mid-century design and barware. Go ahead. So Fran Taylor founded this business at the age of 24 in 1939. Fran was an artist and a painter and quite the entrepreneur. So she graduated from college in Detroit, Michigan in 1938 with a degree in art and painting, and decided that she was going to start her own company, excuse me, hand painting metalware out of her home. And soon after, that caused her to paint glassware. And lo and behold, this young 24-year-old woman ended up creating a glass empire that really has shattered norms, one glass at a time, we like to say, being one of the few and early women in this industry, who really just has an amazing and inspiring story. So when we talk about Fran's early days starting this business, this product on the right-hand side here is one of the earliest that we know she made. The story goes that she purchased 144 wastebaskets for about $40 and hand-painted these tall floral designs on them and sold them to several different department stores in Detroit. And within the first couple of weeks, all of those orders sold out, and they reordered and doubled their numbers, and thus began Fad. So over the years, Fran actually started hiring her friends and family to help her hand paint these metal objects, and had several business locations throughout Detroit and kept growing her business.
And as you think of the context of this time period, you're coming out of the Great Depression, and I can only imagine for her being a young woman, she was thinking that like a lot of the everyday like items that you're interacting with are associated with our severe economic downturn. So the idea of gay fad, of happy trend, was really the thing that she was focused on, of how do we bring joy back into the things that we interact with in the everyday. And she was really hoping that this would kind of take on and become like the thing that more and more companies would associate themselves with. So what's amazing is that over the course of 6 years, her and her friends were painting a wide variety of different metal goods up in Detroit until World War II, when it was suddenly necessary for them to shift from the use of metal to a different material, because all of a sudden, metal being scarce, it was suddenly necessary for them to shift to something else to keep the company going. So if you're not familiar with Ohio and specifically Gay Fad's location, we are in Lancaster, Ohio, where Gay Fad Studios once and now exists again. As you think of the variety of different glassware companies across Ohio specifically, these are just some of them. But it gives you a sense of, ever since the late 1800s, Ohio has been a major producer of glassware. Where we are located, there was not only, and still is today, Anchor Hocking, but many other companies that really helped to define our town as being known as a glass town.
So when Fran was making this transition from metal to glass, she actually traveled through Ohio and visited many small towns that had these glass manufacturers, and actually decided that she absolutely loved the city of Lancaster. And she found a great opportunity to purchase this apartment complex on the left and a couple parcels of land in 1945. And she decided to move herself and her company from Detroit, Michigan to Lancaster, Ohio, and built the building on the right-hand side, which was 46,000 square foot studio, production, and distribution. So that's how Fran made it from Detroit to Lancaster, Ohio. She wanted to be close to large producers of glassware during that day, which included Anchor Hocking, Libby, Federal, Hazel Atlas, West Virginia Specialty. They were all within just a few hours of Lancaster for her to purchase blanks wholesale to decorate.
And again, as you think of the context of this time period, 1945, 1946 is when she ends up moving to Lancaster, designing and overseeing the production of that building. As you think of this time period, it was also a time when the national conversation about women in the workforce was really at the forefront. And what she designed was specifically a building that would provide daycare for the 25 women artists that were initially hired when she ended up building this huge facility. By offering daycare, by sending buses as far as an hour and a half out to drive in those women artists, providing a really great collaborative environment for them, she was really building a business practice that was going to amplify women's voices.
So this is some really rare photos we were able to obtain from family members of the art director. These show the inside of that studio. And on the left-hand side, it's a great example of the 1940s process of how they decorated glassware, which is primarily all hand painted. So Fran actually designed the round tables that they use. They were almost like a lazy Susan as they would spin. So in the middle of the table would be what they would call their master, which was a finished design. And each artist had to go through months-long training to learn how to paint the leaves and the florals and have the right techniques to consistently decorate and mass produce these patterns. So once the glass was hand painted with ceramic paints, they would then go to the right-hand side, which is a long Lear oven. And that Lear oven would take that decorated glass from room temperature to about 1200 degrees back down to room temperature along this slow moving track, kind of like a pizza oven. And that would gradually increase the temperature, fuse the paint to the surface of the glass, and then cool it to prevent any kind of fresh stress fractures into the glassware. And that's how they permanently decorated their patterns onto glass. And it was actually a huge calling card for their business that the patterns would not come off in the wash.
So as you think of decorated glassware from this very early time period, especially American glassware, a lot of the decoration coming out typically was a single color silkscreen. Hazel Atlas was producing glassware, and they might do something, say, like a pink design of elephants, and you're just going to get pink. But all of a sudden, Gay Fad comes along, and they're producing these fully hand-painted illustrations of flowers, of caricatures of like fun little sayings and quips. And that really changed the game for not only what could be done in glassware, but also the permanent nature of it really was something quite special. Now, when they ended up opening up their business in Lancaster, within a 6-month period of time, the building was finished, and Gay Fad ended up producing an entire catalog of a wide variety of products. Now, these are just some of the pages from the 1947 catalog, but it's pretty impressive that they were not only able to produce so much variety in their glassware, but at the same time, Fran opened up the showroom in New York City on Fifth Avenue so that she would be able to sell these wares to a wide variety of businesses across America. Now, in the earlier days of Gay Fad, she had domestic sales reps, but eventually she did move towards having international sales reps. So we do see today still that Gay Fad glass pops up in many other countries and continents.
Primarily Canada, the US, and Europe. So we know for sure that there was a distributor that was located in Toronto, Canada, who sold Gay Fad glassware to other retailers across that area. And we have found quite a few patterns online for sale on Etsy and a couple other places from sellers. But we do know for sure it's up there, it's around.
So as far as why is this so significant for us to specifically talk about Gay Fad today, it's because as we think of all the major glassware producers that did exist, that Gay Fad was really leading the pack of glassware design. Now, back in the 40s, 50s, and even heading into the 60s, there were about 30 glassware decorators that existed. These would be companies that were purchasing blank glassware that was manufactured by someone else, i.e. a Libby or an Anchor Hocking. And they were coming up, these companies were purchasing the blank, then coming up with their own designs, decorating it, firing it, and selling it. So as you think of those 30 different decoration companies, Gay Fad was one of the earliest. Many of those companies did not come about till 1955. And at that point, Fran had already been producing a huge array and selection of glassware for 10 years. And so for that reason, it was really something that we were passionate about how to honestly secure and save this history so that it's not forgotten to time.
So these are some really great early examples of patterns that were released in 1947 in that catalog. A lot of patterns in the 1940s, you'll notice, were actually produced on frosted glass. And they frosted the glassware in-house, and they did that by dipping clear glass in a vat of hydrochloric acid, and that would give a complete acid etch on all surfaces, the inside, the outside, the bottom. And they take those frosted glasses and hand paint them and fire them with those ceramic paints. So their designs are very textural. They're kind of 2D. There's a lot of lift with, you can see all the brush strokes and different colors as they melt together. You'll see a lot of early patterns included florals and fruits in nature. And that's because Fran was a huge nature lover. And a lot of those early motifs represent that. So this is a wonderful example of some of those early designs. You'll notice that there's actually a mark on this glass on the right-hand side to the rose. It's a little GF for gay fad. We'll talk a little bit as we move along, the different signatures and marks that they put onto the glassware to identify as gay fad. But overall, this was a very unique and kind of technically advanced method of decoration, was using those ceramics and oven firing them. And that's what really brought gay fad to the forefront beyond their artistry, was the durability of these patterns and designs.
So over the course of roughly about 24 years, KFAD was creating 1,000 different designs. The cool thing is that those designs were then each applied to at times 60 different items that spanned all different sizes and shapes of glassware, but also getting into barware, so things like decanters, mixing pitchers, cocktail pitchers, but then even casserole dishes, and the list goes on and on. It's quite impressive to see how they were able to take a design and apply it to so many different pieces. So here are some of the earliest glassware that we have an example of. As you can see, it's just on clear glass itself. Chances are the glass was probably produced by Hazel Atlas, which the closest location would have been in Zanesville, which is about 45 minutes from where we're located. And as you can see, just by the brush strokes alone, this was entirely hand painted. What's really amazing though, and I think this speaks to the quality of their production, is that this is just as brilliant and glossy as the day that it was produced. Anytime you see this out in the wild, unless someone is ferocious at using a dishwasher, they will always tend to look like this, which really speaks a lot to the dedication that they had to producing such wonderful glassware.
So as time went on, they also incorporated other methods of decoration, primarily a screen printing or a silk screening of patterns. So that's just kind of like how you would screen print a t-shirt today. You have a negative of the image, a squeegee's used with ink is moved over those voids and deposited onto the surface. That really kind of took them to the next level, where they would incorporate screen printing with hand painting. And then eventually later in the 40s and 50s, they started using all screen printed decorations, and even incorporating things like 22 and 24 karat gold. So in this picture, you'll see the frosted designs of bamboo were actually the first rendition that was done in 1947. And then later in the 50s, you can see the addition of gold, where they redid this pattern on a Tom Collins glass. And there's actually a metallic in the color and also the metallic gold that were applied to the glassware. So you can kind of tell that transition of the 40s frosted into the more modern 50s version of a similar pattern.
And it's quite impressive to see how they were always thinking about innovating and introducing these new methods. As production continued heading into the early to mid 1950s, with a pattern like Bachnal, you can see that they were drawing inspiration from a lot of modern art that was produced at the time. Here we actually have two dancing figures that are really abstracted. They were actually spraying the inside of the glass with ceramic and firing it, which gives it this wonderful kind of milky quality, but also a lot of dimension. Because you have the ceramic on the inside and still the shine of the outer part of the glass, and then the layer of the decoration on top of that, it actually creates these cool little cast shadows underneath each of the dancing figures to just really stand out and look quite unique. This is also one of the rare and few examples that we have where they were decorating using copper. So some of the figures there you can see indicated by the color itself that they were using copper in the design.
In 1954, Fran was really focused on a global distribution and a global market for her company. And she created a whole new sub-brand, a whole new collection of glassware that she gave a French name called Gaieté. And in French kind of means like fun doings, happy, which is kind of like the same version of English meaning for gay fad, fun, happy designs. So she created probably about 8 total patterns that were branded under the Gaieté name and sold it throughout the US and Europe. We found examples of these online in France and Germany, along with a couple other gay fad patterns as well. So when she probably reached the height of her business in the 1950s, having over a couple $1 million a year in sales in today's money. She had 26 national US reps selling gay fad glassware, 6 international reps selling gay fad, and really had a large scale distribution of these products to other retailers across the world. So these are some of our favorite patterns. Intermezzo, talk about a truly abstract vision of music. There are many different instruments and piano keys that come together for this beautiful composition. It's also a great example of how she pulled different styles of glass from multiple producers and put them together for a collection. So this kind of martini glass on the left-hand side with the stem is from Libby out of Toledo. The cocktail shaker, and there's also a pitcher that goes along with it, were produced by West Virginia Specialty Glass in Weston, West Virginia. The rocks and highballs were also produced by Federal Glassware out of Columbus, Ohio. So she didn't just stick with one producer. She would find the pieces that kind of fit together the most for a collection and then do a coordinating pattern across all of them and pull them together. So if you ever see anything signed AITE, that is also a gay fad glass.
And as you think of the time period as well, this was also about the time that so many other producers were suddenly popping up. Now, if Fran's intention was for happy glassware to all of a sudden become a trend, she definitely set the tone and did that. So many other companies started to refer to any kind of mid-century decorated glass as gay glassware. They were marketing it as gay glassware, and we do have examples where other companies were even taking the exact same patterns that gay fad created and doing just a slight color shift, and that might be about it. Now, we do see examples of many companies doing that back then, so we're just not quite sure how they all got away with it. But I think as far as her really wanting to shape or influence what was coming out of glassware at that time, she definitely did achieve it.
This is just another really great example of that mid-century design. Snow Trees from 1955, probably one of the more beloved and desired collectible pieces from that era. It was part of a whole collection called Wonderland. So Snow Trees was part of it. There's also another design called Reindeer, which is the same look with this faded blue interior, the gold and white, but it had reindeers on it. And then there was this sprayed set of dinnerware and servingware that also went with this beautiful kind of Christmas collection.
Here we have Capri, which Capri, the physical glass is actually made by West Virginia Specialty. And West Virginia was also known for doing these really incredible controlled sprays. So with this one in particular, and also Snow Trees, the prior slide, it starts out actually more opaque and then fades up to more of a transparent color. Here we have kind of a sagey green. And then this is also another example where they were doing all the decoration in copper.
Here, we actually don't know what this pattern's called. So they only produced catalogs from 1947 to 1962. We were missing about 7 years worth of catalogs between those eras. So we find designs that are signed gay fad or gaieté, and we just don't have a reference or documentation to tell us what it was called or what year. We know by the style of technique, it was likely the 1950s, but it's a really great example of the technicality and complexity of the patterns that they were producing on glass. Now, mind you, every color is its own screen, and every screen had to be realigned and squeegeed and layered. So to get what they call a registration, which is how tight each layer fits over each other for the design, they were doing this by hand and by eye only. And we actually met one of the screen printers here at the store who was in her late 70s. And we said, how did you do it? You know, she's like, well, that was my first job out of high school. And we just learned how to eyeball it. So there was just a lot of skill, a lot of craftsmanship that was used in the production of these glasses.
Now here's a quintessential mid-century pattern. Starburst was created by Gayfad in 1957. This is another example where they were dipping the glassware in hydrochloric acid to give it that wonderful satiny frosted appearance, both on the outside and inside. And this is also another example where companies were taking influence from one another. If you're familiar with Franciscan dinnerware, Franciscan came out with the Starburst pattern in 1954. Gayfad came out with the matching glassware in 1957. This is definitely still one of those patterns that are heavily sought after just because of its really great kinetic nature and its brilliant colors.
Bolero is just a really fun pattern that we love the line work and interplay with just the simpleness of the gold decoration. Getting a little bit later in 1950s, 1958, this set actually has one of our favorite styles of cocktail shakers. It looks kind of like the Seattle Space Needle, where it's kind of flare at the top, narrow neck, it flares down to a wide bottom. Definitely a very unique shape that we've ever really seen for a cocktail shaker, but just another beautiful design produced by Gayfed.
So we hope that as you're seeing all this original glassware, that's sparking a lot of nostalgia for all of you, or maybe even inspiring what's going to be the next cocktail party coming up. So what is it that Gayfad ended up achieving? Well, like David was sharing, over that period of time, they were very, very quick at growing the company and doing it in profound ways to develop a multi-million-dollar business. Over the course of the time that Fran was at the helm, there was not only that main production facility that was the 46,500 square foot headquarters, but she had 3 additional businesses as well. Um, Fran founded the company and was the CEO for the full run. And Bill Butcher, who is on the left-hand side of the image here, she was the art director for the full 24 years. Now, over that time, it's kind of interesting because we look at original articles and people are almost dumbfounded by Gayfad's success. They did nationally actually refer to Fran as the glassware rebel. And it's because of how she had this uncanny nature to really tap into what people desired of the era. And they were so incredibly innovative and just very exploratory to try so many different things, not only depict what they depicted in glassware, but also the methods that they used.
So many of you may be thinking, well, if they were doing so well, why on earth did they close in 1962? And it was a litany of things. The biggest leading factor was that there was actually another company called the Continental Can Company that purchased one of Fran's business partners, who she sourced glass from. That was Hazel Atlas Glassware. Hazel Atlas was one of the 3rd largest producers of glass in the US during the 1950s. And they were acquired in 1957 by Continental Can, who was a billion-dollar conglomerate that was all about food packaging containers, whether it's wax papers for meats, metal for canned goods, and then eventually when they acquired Hazel Atlas, they had jars and other containers that you would have served and sold food products in. So during this merger, Fran actually gave the new executives of Continental Can, who now own this glass company, Hazel Atlas, a tour of her studio here in Lancaster. And we've been told by her daughter and many other past employees and their relatives the same story. It's pretty corroborated that during this tour, those other employees stole physical drawings of designs out of the art department at Gayfad and actually started trying to reproduce their patterns. Which, to put in context as to why that would be devastating, not only is it the time that's used to create a concept of the artwork, but there's prototypes that are produced, there are catalogs that are designed, there's all this work that sometimes can take up to a year to release a whole new collection. So this company really had a lot of damage to Gayfad that kind of led down this path of closure. In addition to the theft, Fran's employees ended up unionizing in 1958. And over the course of a couple years went on strike, longest period of which was 14 weeks. They closed production. They were seeking an extra week of vacation. So they wanted 2 weeks of vacation instead of one. So there were a lot of things that happened in that 2 to 3 year period that really caused a financial decline of GayFad and ultimately a very abrupt closure in 1962. Now, to add insult to injury, Fran, within the next year, 1963, got in a terrible car accident leaving a business meeting. And as a result of that car accident, ended up with a major brain injury that caused an early onset of dementia. And from the age of 47 in 1963 to her death in 1996 at 83, she lived in a nursing home and was in care for the rest of her life.
So when we found out about this, not only about the meteoric rise of GayFad and the incredibly joyful glassware, but also the other side, which is that Fran was largely forgotten to time. Once the company closed, once she really tried to save it, as the decades passed, so did its story. Even today, you won't find things like a Wikipedia page. You won't be able to go to a local library and find a readily available book. And even for a lot of major glassware collectors that are collecting mid-century glass, they don't know a lot about GayFad because of the fact that a lot has not been documented. However, the way that we like to think about it is that though the ending definitely has tragedy associated with it, that we believe that because Fran really truthfully was so visionary in nature, that her vision was kind of boundless and unrestricted by time. And that the way that she sought out to inspire people in her day and age, that she would actually go on to inspire others, i.e. us. So it was in 2021, actually, I'm going to roll it back here. In 2020, we were finishing up a mural here in our town, and we were asked if we were curious to work on yet another mural. These are great opportunities to really add some color and vibrancy to our downtown. And so with this one in particular, we were focused on how to raise awareness for some of the aspects of our historical town. I ended up coming up with 8 different concepts, and of those 8 concepts, GayFad was one of them. Now, the only reason that we even knew of GayFad was that they had some glassware pieces at the museum across the street, but I only knew about 2 paragraphs worth of information as I developed this pitch. When I ended up walking through the various concepts, the committee overwhelmingly selected that they wanted these GayFad murals to be produced, but nobody on the committee knew of GayFad. So that is honestly what has set us down this fateful path is that we had to research not only the GayFad patterns, because these are permanent murals, but we were also answering a lot of questions through interviews, and it was necessary for us to become educated around the history of GayFad. Now, during this time, the entire city really took over with just so much interest and curiosity about this company that, quote unquote, no one had ever heard of. So many people in the town had forgotten about GayFad, but even nationally, it really started to kind of fall off in its awareness during that time. So what we ended up doing was, after we spent about 4 months' time painting those murals, we were able to actually connect with the founder's daughter and the extended family during that time. We felt like it was really quite magical to see how those murals could raise awareness for a really impressive part of our local history. But we also felt like if we don't keep going, it's just going to die again. And all of those things that not only inspired us, but inspired so many people in our community, all of it would be forgotten. So what we did was we actually had a conversation with the founder's daughter. Her name is Stephanie. And we outlined how that we would like to really thoughtfully and respectfully bring her mom's company back. And that's exactly what we did. So in 2022, we actually resurrected Fad Studios. We reimagined it as a boutique store where we are actually designing and producing our own glassware using the same methods that GayFad established back in the 40s. We also do a lot of custom glass, and we are actively working on rebuilding the company so that we can reestablish having a studio of artists just as Fran had back in the day.
Yeah. So this is a really great example of what some of our new glassware looks like today. We primarily focused on barware items like a rocks, a beverage, Collins. Eventually, we will get into dinnerware and stemware. But the cool thing is that we are producing this all in Ohio again today, just like GayFad used to. A lot of our blank glass is primarily produced by Libby out of Toledo, Ohio. Jason does all the graphic design and artwork. And then we have a company here in Ohio who screen prints with ceramics and 24 karat gold and oven fires them, just like the original GayFad glass used to. So we like to say it has the same look and feel and quality of vintage glass, but it's newly produced today. And that in its own right was a little bit of a challenge. Jason's always been an artist, but has also been a researcher. And I am a vocational rehab counselor and have always done community mental health and rehab services. Neither of us had ever worked in glassware before or designed glassware, but we had the crazy notion that we'd revive this company and just figure it out. And thankfully we have. It took a solid year probably of going through those processes and learning, the limitations and what was possible. But we've now gotten to the point where we've had over 50 patterns produced in the last 2.5 years.
So here are some additional patterns that we've produced. As you can see, we tend to stick with mostly beverage and rocks glasses for the 2023 heading into 2024 calendar year. That's because we were actually kind of like educating ourselves around like what's possible. Now there are limitations with what you can do with ceramics and 24 karat gold. There's also regulations in today's standards of what colors you're allowed to use because of the actual materials that are found in ceramics. And so for that reason, like we wanted to keep it pretty simple with what style or type of glassware we were using as we were going through design after design and producing it. Now, this page is also significant because in your top right and the two glasses sets on the bottom, those designs that were stolen in 1963. Now, it's a crazy idea to say that you want to revive a company that closed 60 years ago, especially because most of the employees are all dead. There's not necessarily like people that we can talk to that we can ask them, how did you do this? But especially when we found out the tragedy associated with the closing of GayFad, it was this daydream of an idea of how could we ever, if possible, find the original 1963 designs. And these three sets, along with 22 other designs, are exactly that. So it was just a little bit over a year ago that we were able to connect with someone that had the original artwork, and we were finally able to get the designs on glassware as the company intended back in 1963. So it's been little things like that just make it all the more fulfilling as we think about really reviving the company and its story.
So if you can imagine, beyond this concept of reviving GayFad as a company today and reimagining, what does it look like? We're also really trying to preserve the legacy and the history of the company. And as Jason said before, there's really not a lot of documentation out in the public sphere for people to learn about what a pattern is called, what year it was produced, what is Fran's story, etc. So since we've revived the company in 2022, we've also started a Fad Studios glass museum and have been purchasing thousands of pieces of original GayFad glassware, photographing them, and also trying to collect as much physical documentation of catalogs, original product photography, advertisements from newspapers and magazines, and collecting oral history from any relatives and or family members of past employees, so that we can author a couple of books and get the story on paper and documented for others to learn.
So it was in the summer of 2023. So 1 year after we reopened GayFad and started producing glassware for a boutique store, that we opened up the Glass Museum. And as you can see by the top middle photo there, it was a very, very busy weekend, a really great weekend for us to launch the museum itself. And this is where it really is like the source for people to come and learn about GayFad and all the various glassware and aspects of the story that people are really they're really admiring a lot. We can go into so much more detail, but it really is like such an invigorating story. So it was a year after that, that we ended up thinking a little bit more about our position. What we did not know when we revived Gay Fad was that of those 30 glassware producers that used to exist back in the 50s and 60s, almost all of them closed. In today's standards, there's only 3 left. And of those 3, only 1 actually decorates their own glass. So it put us in a very unique position that we are the only mid-century glassware company to come back from that era. That also made sense to us because as we were looking for conventions, we found out that there are none. So that's where we decided to take it upon ourselves to create one. And so it was in the summer of 2024 that we introduced Bottoms Up. It is a 3-day event of celebrating the cocktail culture of the mid-century era. It is the nation's only event that is of this nature. And what we did was, rather than being within a huge convention center, we took over our downtown. Across a 6-block radius of the downtown, we worked with 40 local businesses, all 5 museums, and 2 or 3 nonprofits to create what is essentially a mid-century takeover of everything. So as attendees came into town, whether you went to a local bar, a restaurant, a museum, everything that you would experience would be mid-century. The local bartenders were going back into their books and looking at original cocktails from that time period. But then in addition, we had vendors that were selling original glassware, barware, cocktail clothes, drink stirrers, and even full bars. At our vendor show, there was a huge antique car show, a couture fashion show, and the list goes on of all the different events and activities that people could partake in. Good.
And it turned out amazing. We ended up, like Jason said, with over 50 activities across 3 days. That also included 30 unique classes that focused on how do you make cocktails and mocktails and make garnishes and pack and ship glassware and all the things that a novice to an expert would want to learn. We also brought in 10 expert presenters to talk about Libby, Anchor Hawking, Fad Studios, Georges Briard, Fred Press, all of these other kind of really well-known designers of mid-century glassware. We also invited a fabulous artist out of Palm Springs, California by the name of Shag. He ended up being our guest artist for that weekend. He came in and did a presentation, which was completely packed. I think there were 250 people there to see him present. He had a pop-up store. He did a custom piece of artwork for the event itself. We really were trying to allow lovers of glassware and mid-century to come together in a physical space and enjoy that sense of community and camaraderie and do the things that they already love, which is learning, experiencing, and sharing. And we ended up bringing in about 20,000 people coast to coast from 39 different states and even Canada to come and spend time with us for this 3-day event. So for the first year, it really went very well.
Yeah. We were incredibly busy, as you can imagine, and we've already set the dates for this year. So June 26th through the 29th. It's actually 4 days this year instead of 3 days. We will be not only revisiting a lot of the aspects of what made it a great event, but we're also adding some additional activities for everyone to enjoy. So if you're interested to learn a little bit more about us, I'll actually send this presentation out to everyone so that you can just click on the links. One of the best ways to learn about more of the details of the history of the company, plus our story to resurrect Gay Fad, would actually be in Ohio Magazine at the top here. Their particular article did a wonderful job of stitching together so many different details of what the company stood for and where we're going with it. And it's one that we like to highlight for that reason. But like I said, I'll just send this out just so that everyone has the opportunity to access it if they'd like.
And that is it. So I know that we wanted to save a decent amount of time for some Q&A. So we'd like to open that up and see what kind of questions you may have.
Thank you so much. That was fabulous.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I will stop the recording. Hold on. And then